Hey, good morning. I'm Oliver Gao. I'm the director of Cornell System Engineer here, and I've been fortunate to conduct these system conversations with the great minds that we bring to Cornell to our Ezra System Seminar Series. Today, I'm very delighted to introduce to you our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Leonardo Basso. Maybe I can call you Leo.
Leo, please, by
yes,
all means.
Yes, Leo is actually he is a full professor at the Department of Civil Engineering, and he received his degrees in civil engineering and also master degrees in transportation engineering, both from I think Universidad de Chile.
Exactly.
Yes. So and then he went on to get his PhD from the Southern School of Business, which is at UBC, a very top university in Canada. So actually, he is here today with us to talk a lot about kind of how his group and his team helped the Chilean government to cope with this worldwide crisis of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think that's Leo. Welcome to Cornell. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm so happy to finally make it here.
Yes, we wanted to bring you here very early on. So that when I was looking at your research, and I see a lot of kind of similarities, between our passes. But I'm sure you can see ever since you graduated from your PhD, of course, you returned back to University of Chile and you started teaching. And apparently now your research is no longer just in transportation. It's actually much broader. But I think please tell us more about yourself, your career, because that is a fascinating story, I believe.
All right, sure. And thanks again. I started as a transportation engineer, with the classic networks, problems, and so on. Then I start little by little moving towards transportation economics. And when I went to UBC, to the business school, I was actually closer to the strategy and business economics group than the OR group. Mm-hmm. And I was trained as an economist. So when I go back to my university that hired me, and I decided to go back to Chile rather than going into the job market. If you see my early papers, you'll see transportation engineering, transport economics, but I also have done and still do a lot of IO, industrial economics. Mm-hmm. So I have papers on mergers, on collusion, and those kind of things, which mm-hmm. is somewhat less related. When I went back, I joined the Complex Engineering Systems Institute that was run by Andrés Weintraub, a name that everyone in the OR community knows well. Mm-hmm. This center, it's funded by the Chilean government and has the following idea. The idea of the Complex Engineering Systems is it's going to be a multi-university research center that blends different disciplines to try to tackle complex problems. And the definition of complex is, in order to improve or to solve, you need these different disciplines to work together. Otherwise, you were not going to be able to do it. So I joined this institute, and after 13 years of Andrés running the center, I took over. This happened in October 1st, 2019, so about 3 years ago. And so my first challenge was the social uprising that hit Chile, and next COVID. Those have been my 3 years of directorship. And I've learned lots. The Institute has 5 disciplines: data science, energy, a group that's called MORE, Market Organization and Regulation, so the economists, mm-hmm. transportation engineering, and operations research and management, so the analytics group. Mm-hmm. It's large. We are 50 people there from different universities. And the idea, and this is why the funding comes, is we are supposed to do research, innovate, make that innovation transfer into societal impact. If you don't do that last part, then you're not fulfilling the idea of this funding. And so the usual business, for instance, is our energy group is deep into decarbonization. Mm-hmm. In Chile, that means a lot of renewables, which is something that is happening, but that requires new ways of dealing with markets. And so the energy people work together with the economists and people to organize these markets and make them work better. And then our people come to help with the distribution problem of renewables, which are distributed along the country. And so you mix these three groups, you get results. And then COVID came. And when COVID came, we made this huge decision of trying to focus resources and people into that crisis. So that's the overall story of how I started with transportation engineering and ran through economics to end up working only on COVID for the last 2 years.
That's wonderful. Leo, thank you for sharing your story. And when I was listening to your story and kind of your evolution of your career, I think that sounds quite natural kind of evolution, of like a researcher growing up and expanding, his horizon. So especially, I think you mentioned, of course, you talk about the Complex Engineering Systems yes. Institute that now you are the director. So, and also, as you mentioned, it's not only cross-disciplinary, it's multi-institution.
Yes.
And I think that's wonderful. So, now, of course, you've been running that, and I think you mentioned several aspects of the benefit of having such, an institute. And also, as you mentioned, that the mission of this institute is to innovate. But not only for innovation, it's really innovation for impacts.
That's the way we're measured, yeah.
Right, I think that as you mentioned. So, of course, while you are running this successful institute, but if you look around in your country, across the world, you probably feel that actually there should be more institutions like what you have. And unfortunately, I don't think we have enough. So can you, especially with your experience, both kind of, dealing with uprising as well as, coping with the pandemic, why do you think that we need such kind of institutes that are institution cross the discipline? Because look, universities like University of Chile, Cornell University here can say we have all these traditional departments, right? And they're all doing fine. And why now you say, we have the institute that you're running, and here at Cornell we have this Cornell System Engineering program we're running, and we're all excited about that. But to many people outside of the institute, outside the programs, they might be wondering, why?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we need more either institutions or programs like this. The systems program is a good example of what I do believe should happen. Why institutions and not only programs? An institution that is funded requires people, if they belong to this institution and do have perks, to actually work together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the silos are so old and big that this interaction it's not easy to happen. You have to help it. You have to bring the problems. You have to have, if you want, a little bit of from the top help to make those things happen. And so what happens with the institute is that we now get the problems, and we can turn to our researchers and say, okay, guys, there is this problem. We need a team. Who's coming in? And that's the way we dealt with COVID. It's very impressive. We had the idea of helping in different issues, and as a director, I cannot force anyone. I can't. Mm-hmm. But I did say I need people from this discipline and from this discipline and from this discipline to tackle this problem. who wants to help, and people came, and they got the results.
Beautiful. I think that Leo, I think you hit a very key point. You cited this, dealing with the pandemic crisis, and I feel that's exactly, these kind of problems are exactly where system engineering has the unique, the strengths, to solve these problems, because these problems, they are systems in nature. They are no longer just OR problem.
No.
It's an energy problem. It's a data problem. Actually, you have to, it's more like a kind of, I guess when you are calling all those people from different teams, you are acting more like a conductor.
Exactly. That's a good
an
word.
Orchestra.
That's
right?
a good word.
Yes. So now I think I want to, especially kind of, the marvelous achievement your team did in helping the government cope with the COVID-19. I want to now zoom in a little bit on that. So tell us more about, when your institute, when you actually were called upon for all this, pandemic crisis, and how, what did you see at the moment, the key challenges?
Yeah.
And then how did you solve, how did you take advantage of your institute to tackle those challenges?
I think you're going to like this story, Oliver, because it speaks about how important it was that something like the Institute, which is, as you said, it's not common, existed. That was our main advantage, was that we existed as an institution with the back office, with the story, and with funding. So what happened was when COVID arrived to South America in March, mm-hmm. I took a quick look at all the things that we promised we would do with our funding, which is not small. For disclosure, the Institute receives $2 million a year. Mm-hmm. And I saw and I said, all these things are not going to happen. All these things that we said we're going to do with industry, they are not going to happen. So I asked the board of the Institute to, if you want, bring back this money into the Institute and devote it for COVID, so that we can spend quickly and hire if needed and work if needed. And the next thing we decided to do was, there were a bunch of groups working on forecast of cases, forecast of death. I decided that I did not want it to just forecast death and mayhem and chaos. Mm-hmm. We decided that we wanted to help decision makers. So not work from the paper, but work from what they need us to do.
Work from the reality.
So the first thing that I did was I called upon a meeting with infectologists, epidemiologists, healthcare workers, people running hospitals, and we met with them and say, what do you need? And we made a list. And we decided to start working on these things. And then once we had ideas, we tried to talk to the government. Not easy. They were busy as hell. And they don't necessarily believe, because of previous experience, that people from academia can deliver something. Essentially, the idea is, I'm not interested really in your paper. I have an actual problem to deal with.
They are not totally wrong.
I would say so. And so we did two things. One was, the first problem was mobility. We knew, because we were running into lockdowns, and lockdowns work only if people do not move. How do we measure mobility? So we talked to the largest telecom company in the country. We had technical relations with them already. And we asked them to sign a strategic alliance, NDA, mm-hmm. to try to transform every cell phone connection to the infrastructure to movement. Mm-hmm. We were very fast. We strike that alliance, and so we were able, after hard work, and this is important, OR people, transportation people, and now we have to bring geographers.
Yes.
And so we make a team and we transform cell phone data into mobility data, adequately aggregated and anonymized. And then we started learning how people were not staying at home. Now, this is not the Big Brother. It takes us more than a week to process the last week. So, but we knew lockdowns were not working. And we knew why, because we knew that people were not moving to their usual works. They were not there. They were moving every single day, especially poor people, to what it's called open markets. They needed to go and buy groceries. Recall that because of the social uprising, many supermarkets were closed. A lot of people lost their jobs, so they went there to do informal economic activity. So the problem was not that people were not complying, the problem was that people were not able to comply, which required help. And that opened the eyes to the government to say, we need to provide help here, here, and here. In the meantime, we had these other ideas trying to talk to the government, and we didn't manage. And this story is 100% real. I have no idea how to talk to them, how to get to them. I was able to get a hold on the cell phone of the Undersecretary of Health through a friend who belongs to the same political party than the Undersecretary. That's. And then Sunday night at midnight, I WhatsApp him. I sent a WhatsApp message saying, I'm this person, I'm the director of this institute, we have this idea, we can help. 3 in the morning, I got a message back from the Undersecretary saying, Monday, 5 p.m., you have 15 minutes. And so that day, we prepared 3 slides. We go into some meeting, we present what the idea that we had at that point, that was organizing the shifts of critical care workers so that they got less sick. So we present, he's with a bunch of people, he mutes the meeting for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he comes back to me and says, can you simulate this with real data from this hospital? I say, yes, we can. For tomorrow, yes, we can. Okay, tomorrow, 5 p.m., you have 15 minutes. And so we start running simulations like crazy, trying to make our best graphs. Then we go back on Tuesday and say, this is what we can actually do for you. And he says, okay, I'm convinced. This is my chief of staff. Get connected. That's how we started. And then when you start working and you do pilots, and this is a very important message. How is it that we work? We did a pilot, one hospital. It works. And then they say, okay, it's working, let's go national. And that happens with almost every initiative that we did. We did a pilot at work, and then they ask us, let's go national. Which is, Oliver, stressful, very stressful, because we are academics, and they say...
You're not used to.
Exactly. when they ask me, Leo, can we go national? And I say, yes, we can. And then I panic. How am I going to do this? And that's when our students came in. We recruit a bunch of them to start running things for different regions of the country. We got them in call centers. We had these tools that the government was using. And these guys had a cell phone, and they were calling them, and they explained how it works and what they were doing. It was great for students. So that's how we started. And after you win, after they believe that you can deliver results when they need it for decision makers, then they start calling upon you. Then it starts going the other way around.
So, Leo, that's so impressive. Actually, I want to thank you, because the way you did it, actually, you changed the image that decision makers usually had in their mind about academics. Because essentially, I think, in this process, as you just described, you were acting more like an entrepreneur, rather than the director of this academic institute, right? You are basically, also, I think, you essentially went out of the traditional ivory tower. Because the ivory tower, you can keep dreaming, and you can write papers, but with no deadlines, right? But now this one, you meet with them right, in the morning, and tomorrow 5 p.m. right? You need to deliver something, right? That's quite impressive.
It was different. We decided to do it differently. Different than, here's my paper, you can call me if you want. No, there was a huge issue about data, and I guess this was the same thing in every single country about where data, all the data was out there or not, and there was a debate, a heated debate and a few profs saying, if they don't put the data, we cannot help. And talking to the Ministry of Science, who was a professor before being Minister of Science, says, hey, Leo, the thing is very simple. With this data, the minister is going to make a decision. So you can either be there when he makes the decision or not. And we decided to be there with the data that was there and try to bring new data if the data was not there, such as mobility. But that is a different decision in these terms. This is the data, and we want it to be there when the minister or the president make a decision. Because it's better to be than not to be there. And being mad at your ivory tower because the data is not clean enough or you're not sure enough or whatever. And so that was a decision. It was a decision to be there and to avoid all public policy controversy, which I guess it was huge everywhere.
Yes. We
decided, and you can check this on my Twitter account and any person that was involved, there is never going to be controversy. And we decided if there is controversy from our side, then our scientific message will be blurred. So it was only science. Everything can be dealt with later. Today, if you do not help, then people die. That was our main idea.
Great. I think it's kind of, especially during such kind of urgent times, facing such a scale of crisis, and in the meantime, because you have to have access to the individual activity data, either to keep tracking or giving information to people. So which means this data is also very sensitive.
Yes.
And they apparently kind of how to avoid controversy is such key. And you mentioned this. So when you were dealing with this data, of course, you're on one side you're getting the data from the government or get the permission from the government to get accessibility to this data. But in the meantime, and you're going to deal with this data that comes from all these different thousands, millions of individuals. So in this process, and so what was your principle to avoid controversy? Because I think by the end of the day, if you look back, you say actually the reason why we avoided controversy was because of these 2 or 3 principles.
Yes.
That you stick to.
I agree. So with mobility data. We have the data aggregated and anonymized at the census block level. And TEL could have given me data at a smaller level. And I decided not to. I said, I do not want data that is smaller than this. Because if you look at what the law says and what Human Rights Watch says about anonymization and aggregation, that's good enough for us. We can deal with this. By aggregating at this level, we are okay with whatever international organization says about anonymity and aggregation. And we actually, whenever we were giving this data to the public, we would say, these are the principles we're following for anonymization and aggregation. And for the epidemiological data, we used only the data that was publicly available. That the GitHub of the Minister of Science is huge. There is a lot of data. And the only thing we asked for was that some data was aggregated for us in a different way. And we asked the government to do that because we didn't have the time to do it. And so, anonymized and aggregated data following every single principle of international organizations such as Human Rights Watch, publicly available data, and the rest was just working with the data and making models and running and eventually delivering a tool that was useful for somebody.
Yes. So of course, I think Leo, when you talk about this, of course, we talk so much about data, and I think one thing from the very beginning, when you were approaching the Chile government, either the health department or the communication department, I think you made a very clear thing that you want to support, you want to help the decision maker.
Yes.
I think this is really so critical because now this reminds me, because you see in recent years there are so many programs coming up. They all call themselves data science.
Yes.
Now there is Department of Data Science, or Institute of Data Science, or Center of Data Science. But one thing I think you did very beautifully is really, your work in the past 2 or 3 years. It's not only about data science. It's really about data science for what? Kind of all the way going back to the impacts that you aspire to achieve. It's really data science for society, right? For decision making. So this way, and well, basically science and a decision, right? These are two things. And of course, when it comes to the decision side, it's really science and politics. Decision is politics. So here I want to clarify kind of, because for many academics, for many people who are not really closely involved in politics, they think that politics is ugly, right? However, when you, as a scientist, and when you try to support a decision maker, you inevitably start interacting with the politics, and you observe that you probably feel actually politics is understandable instead of being ugly. So that way, how do you marry science and politics to serve your country?
There are two things. We decided to provide information as much as we could. But we understood, and I had these long discussions with the Minister of Science. The Minister says, I'm in the cabinet, of course, but I'm not necessarily the minister that the President listens more to. There are others. And there's one thing that you guys need to understand. When a decision is made, it will take into account science, but also there are other things that they take into account. And so the idea of providing information means that you are not demanding that information is going to be the only source of information. You are providing more tools, you are providing more information, and you have to believe that this group of authorities want what is best and that they are seeing things that you're not seeing. They are seeing other problems. They deal with majors. They deal with congressmen. They deal with other things that also put pressure on those decisions, and you cannot see those. And so you have to understand that your information is one piece of information, and that there are others, and they are not ugly. They are things that need to be taken into account, so that eventually things actually happen. Because if you demand, you don't help, and what's going to happen is that the door is going to be closed for you.
That's right. So excellent. So Leo, now I think kind of we discussed about how while being an academic, in academics, actually you approached it. You made, I would say, you made a bold decision, because if you did not do that, you probably did not have to go through that much stress, right?
Yeah.
So you made a bold decision, and you approach that more like an entrepreneur, and you want to serve the country using your institute, and in the end, because of your effort, you got the job. You got the trust from the government, and that's actually, of course, now looking back, that was from only the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. The real work will start. Now it's like it's like peeling the onion. Now let's get deeper in. So now you get the job. The government wanted you to help. Now let's get to our part. So how did you approach this complex problem? Of course, there's data, there's multiple agencies, departments, and even within your institute, you have these different team members from different disciplines. So can you draw a thread of now, looking back in hindsight, how did your institutes kind of more technically address, like how did you convert or translate the government and the societal needs into some problem that your people can address, and then in the end successfully address and deliver the value? So for the depth.
There are 4 initiatives that were packed together and that we used to apply for the Franz Edelman Award that we eventually win. The first one was mobility. Mm-hmm. So the idea was, can we say something about mobility? And I think I don't know if it is the only case in the world where we we partnered with a telecom company to do what we did. At that point, we had to bring in the geographers.
Mm-hmm.
We brought transportation engineers, especially me, and OR people to try to transform this into data. And then we were looking at what was happening. We learned that the reason why infections with lockdowns were slowing down in rich municipalities, but not in poor municipalities, was that in poor municipalities, mobility was not slowing down. 8 out of 10 trips were still being done. Then you discuss with the authorities and say, no, that's not true. We have counters of traffic, and traffic is not there.
Mm-hmm.
You also have these smart cards on transit, and it's not there. So with geography, we saw, say, people are not driving, people are not taking the bus,
mm-hmm.
they are walking, and they are biking. And they are no longer traveling 10 kilometers, they are traveling 3. And they're walking 3 kilometers or biking 3 kilometers and going to these open markets. And we showed that in open markets, the entry to these open markets incremented by 60% as opposed to a normal week during lockdowns. So why were people in poor municipalities getting sick? Because they were crowded at these open markets.
Mm-hmm.
Can you close the open markets? No, because otherwise people don't have food. They had to work. So the idea was, okay, you need to help them now. So that first initiative required 3 different disciplines, at least: geographers, OR people, and transportation people.
Yes.
The second initiative was lockdowns were working, but slowly. And in the first wave, as in the rest of the world, we were running out of beds, of ICU beds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Ministry of Science, now that he had confidence, we were working with 3 or 4 hospitals, organizing their shifts so that critical care workers get less infected. You can actually organize those shifts and make what now we know are called bubbles, right? Mm-hmm. And then he called us and says, we were started to discussing the last bed dilemma, terrible moments. And he says, Leo, we have the following problem. We have a lot of teams working on these epi models, and they tell us this is when it's going to happen in 2 months, this is what's going to happen in 3 months, these are big waves. Our problem is we do not know how many beds we need in a week. So it's a short-term problem. How many beds do we need in a week or in 2 weeks? Can you help? And I said, yes. So I turned and I said, I need people to come here. And then if for mobility, that was led by, I worked with Marcelo Olivares and Gabriel Weintraub from Stanford, Chilean guy in Stanford. Mm-hmm. Here we worked with Marcel Goich. And we built the first compartmental model in 2 days. Mm-hmm. I made a call and called the 2 largest university ICU centers, and I discussed with the leaders of the teams and say, I need you to be on top of whatever we're going to do because we're going to need your insight. Mm-hmm. And in 2 days, we made the first report that was sent to the President, the Minister of Science, the Minister of Health, with our report for how many beds are going to be needed in 1 week. Mm-hmm. And then that was OR, data science, and ICU doctors. Yes. So we were working on that. I'm going to say this story tomorrow in the talk, but we had the model. There was a huge problem with data. Data was lagged because people at hospitals were not able to type the information. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you get the information, sometimes you don't. The virus was evolving. And so your lengths of stay distribution were changing. And then sometimes you see, for some reason, now people between 30 and 40 are taking longer to go to ICU. And so I pick up the phone and I call Dr. Tobar and say, Doctor, what's happening with people between 30 and 40? He said, yes, we learned something. If we do this and that, then we can hold until they go to ICU. So there was clinical learning as well. Mm-hmm. And because of all that, we decided to hit the problem with everything we can, and we ran together with the compartment model machine learning models, autoregressive models. We learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
We ensemble that, and then, and this is an important lesson, we put that in a report that the president would look. And this is very important because what we wanted to do was tables, regressions, confidence intervals. And I worked the first time with the Minister of Science for 3 hours and says, the president is not going to look at this. I say, okay, what do we do? I say, we worked on a slide that the president will look at. That's when we learned that we're not going to be able to put confidence intervals in the graphs.
Uh-huh.
Because the question will be, what are those bars? And so we say, okay, it's hard for a scientist not to put those, mm-hmm. but we want to help. And so we worked on a slide that the minister and the president will look at. And they did. Mm-hmm. And we did very well in our predictions. And so we helped to tell them where they needed to speed up the creation of new ICU beds and where they would not be able to get them and they needed to move people from one region to the other, which they did by helicopter. So that was OR, data science, ICU doctors. And the next initiative was once we started being able to catch a breath, we wanted to go for testing more, testing better. And we said, okay, what can we do? And one doctor, a former Minister of Health, called me on the phone and says, why don't we test on the street? And I said, why not? But the question is where? And so we said, okay, we know where infected people are. We do believe that around these infected people, other people are getting sick, especially in Latin America, because we hug, we kiss, we are very warm. But these guys are sick, but they do not know. They move, but we do know where they move. So if you pick a hotspot area and another hotspot area, and you know these guys are moving into this place, you know you want to be there. And so we start calculating these things. Hotspots for searching for asymptomatic cases, the places were not obvious, not the obvious place, not the place with most circulation, because it depended on how the virus was moving. Mm-hmm. And we provided every single region of the country since November 2020 with a weekly heat map that they could navigate to place their operations for search for asymptomatic cases on the public space. Mm-hmm. And we captured a whole lot of them. Many, really many. And the work there was with infectologists, because testing and trying to find them was not really obvious. So that's when we started working with MDs from infectology. The two guys that we work more are now part of the institute. For the first time, we have, I'm going to say, actual doctors in the institute, MDs. And so we've gone across disciplines from engineering to bring health, infectologists, epidemiologists, geographers. And so now we are even more spread than before.
Yes. That's the wonderful. I think you mentioned, actually, you mentioned the first initiative, that was the mobility initiative. Mm-hmm. And the second is kind of hospital ICU.
Yes.
And the third one, I think you talk about, testing and testing more.
Yes.
It's kind of, and then I think your approach is about hotspot and heat map.
Yeah.
Right. You produce it. Like, it's really about kind of from distances. You know that this one is going to be an emergent.
Exactly.
Hotspot, and then you get your resources. You pre-position.
That's what we did. We said people do not know. But in this place, there's probably going to be a high positivity of people moving around the public space. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to put there a PCR testing station for free, and we're going to let people go and take a PCR test if they want. And station the thing there makes it more likely to capture these asymptomatic cases than in any other place of the city. Mm-hmm. And because the virus was moving, the place is not always the same. Actually, the place is not always the same within a week, because things happen during weeks. So our heat maps would say, this is the best place on Monday, this is the best place on Thursdays, where you have whatever happening market or so on. Mm-hmm. And the next week, we will calculate again. depending on how the virus was moving and any change in mobility that we saw.
That's beautiful. So I think Leo, this, that of course, with all this data, in the end, it provides us, of course, if processed intelligently, data provides us with insight.
Yes.
And wisdom. But, data science and even insights are not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is really, impact decision making and in somehow, quote unquote, control. Because it's only when you're able to control something and then you can improve something. But one thing I feel like your approach is that actually by producing heat map and using all these forecast OR people, data science people, geographer, and also doctors, you are really it's more like sound to me like from a model. It's more like a model predictive control, such that you know what things are going to happen, so that you can actually guide the population, the crowd, instead of controlling them. Because I believe you said before the pandemic you work on uprising. And you probably learned that controlling the crowd is impossible. However, guiding them.
That is a huge issue.
Yeah.
When we had the alliance with Intel, telecom company, the thing that kept me wondering is we're gonna be tracking, anonymized and aggregated, the mobility of people. There is a huge danger that people will see this as the big brother. See, Intel had no reason to sign this contract with us. They could have said, no, I do not want to place my company in this danger. Mm-hmm. Yet they did. And I think they deserve a little medal for it. And it's one great example of what is called the triple helix. Private sector, academia, and government. And there's one more thing that I want to say. Is, of course, we could not control. Like I was talking to Shane Henderson before. Contact tracing, impossible. People would never take it. So we decided to work with aggregated data and public data. And we were able to do something. We're at Cornell. Publishing here is very important. I learned this. We took the problem, we innovate quickly, we helped, and then we published. And we published well. Mobility was published in management science. Mm-hmm. Testing was published in healthcare management science. We have now 2 Lancet publications with the first author engineer and the last author engineer.
That's impossible before.
We have an integer program in a Lancet publication. So the papers did arrive, and they are good papers because they are based on an actual problem, and because they are innovative. So this, of course, comes, it's a close comment, but there is a path to great publications when you do it that way as well.
I agree with you, definitely. And also, it's really as you always going back to your initial it's always about innovation for impact.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's beautiful. So now, Leo, looking back, I know you've done great. So of course, this was really learning and doing.
Yeah.
In parallel.
Yes.
There was no historic kind of like models that you can step into. So now looking back, are there any places you feel that actually you could do better?
Looking at the past?
Or you say that actually we did perfect?
No, not at all. One of the things about telling these stories, and it's going to be true when I gave the talk tomorrow, is that you tell the success stories, and then you tell them linearly. This is the way it went. It's never like that.
Uh-huh.
We failed on many initiatives. We thought we were going to be able to do things that we couldn't. The Greece story of success on the borders, great. We couldn't do it. We were not able to get the impact. We thought we would be able to to do more at the university levels and the schools in terms of testing often as Cornell did, we were not able to do it. So somehow there were many things that we were either not we were not able to convince authorities or didn't have the strength to do. And regarding those, of course, these ones worked. Regarding those, I think that I probably did not explain well what was possible, or was not convincing enough, or did not find the right partners to do so. What I learned now is that it is important to get those connections running with less sense of urgency. You're going to be able to do, I hope, to keep them going now, but you don't have to let go. I mean, it is now way too easy that we go back to our offices, doctors go back to the med school, and forget about this.
You can give it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now it's where we have to keep the pace and transform all this and all that learning into new impacts and new innovations. And we've been discussing those with David and Shane. There are paths that we can follow. There are learning. We can learn from Cornell. Cornell can learn from what we did and move ahead. That's why one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be in here with the systems program, and because of all you did. There is learning, and there is a path to the future, I believe.
Wonderful. I think, Leo, I very much appreciate, two things so far. One is really, I can see, and you are not just a pure academic. You are really an entrepreneur. The way you did things, right? You are brave enough. You're passionate actually to take up, the new challenge, for the call of the country, right? To help and serve the society. Another thing I really appreciate your optimism. You talk about just now a path to the future. And of course, when we talk about the future, it's not only about you and me sitting here. Actually, the future generations.
For sure.
And the students in our programs. So I know our time is up, but I do want you to talk to our. So for example, as about our education and our training in system engineering, in data science. But I think one key thing I'm so impressed today is that you are really you've been walking the walk, kind of not only teaching in the classroom, but you are really basically applying what you have to meet those real challenges. So what would you say to our future generations of system engineers or our data scientists, and what would you say to them so that they can achieve like similar what you did or even beyond what you did?
What I would tell them is that they look things the other way around. They don't look at the syllabus of each course. Don't look at the program. Tell me about a problem. Tell me about a problem that motivates you, something that you want to change. And then tell us how you're going to need all these tools from the systems program to be able to improve or change. Start the other way around. What is it that you want to change? And then you're going to soon realize that you do need to go through all these courses with all these profs to be able to solve that problem.
Yes.
And we have now a lot of examples where engineers did change the world. I know we are probably less, we're not artists, we're not philosophers, yet we do change the world.
Beautiful. I think it's kind of, you are really talking about kind of not starting from textbook, starting from problems, right? And I think that's so important. That's also why, of course, if you and I, in the higher education, if we think about what our higher education is really about, what value do we bring? For most academics, they keep writing proposal, getting grant, publishing a paper, writing proposal like this. But we really need to think about our role to the society. and our value to the society and to the students.
Yeah.
So that way, and also for the students, they need to think about, yes, they're going to get a University of the Chile degree, they're going to get a Cornell degree,
Yeah.
but for what?
Exactly.
Right? And to solve those problems. That's how, I don't know, like your institute and here, for Cornell cismanian program, actually we don't have an undergraduate degree, but we have a full spectrum of the graduate degrees from Master of Engineering, which is a professional degree, and Master of Science, and the PhD. And another thing, actually, I'm very excited, which is very unique. I don't know if you do back there is, for our professional degree program, we have a large number of people directly from industry.
Yeah.
We have this learning component that actually they, while maintaining a full-time job, they are getting to Cornell through distance learning. They're getting this professional degree. Actually, I found that part to be particularly rewarding as an instructor, because those people, they come to the program exactly like you said. They have the problems in mind, and because those problems, they decided to invest their time while maintaining a full-time job and they take care of the family and taking the challenge to come back to the program. And I feel it's really kind of people, when they have the problem in mind, they are better motivated, they're better oriented.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree with what you say. We at the institute, we deal mostly with grad students. During the COVID crisis, we engaged a whole lot of undergrad students who now want to do this. They want to learn because there is something that they are passionate about.
You inspired them. Yeah,
your project.
Yeah.
It changed the lives of many.
Yes.
Some of them, they dropped courses to help. Can you imagine? Mm-hmm. They dropped courses because they wanted to work more with us during those 2 years. That's
right, but actually they ended up learning more than taking.
I would say so.
I would say so.
Yeah. I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. This is beautiful. I think, Leo, I wish we had more time to discuss, but I'm sure in the coming days we are going to continue to interact. I want to thank you again for sharing your wisdom and your insight from I think meeting that challenge of the pandemic crisis. And congratulations on achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful.